think so. And in that morning consult poll that came out on Saturday, that actually showed Biden holding the ground, maybe even picking up in one or two swing states. One of the things that they said, and it was something we heard about Trump, and it's something that has even been used to justify the lack of coverage in Trump, is have you remembered a phrase that they've used a lot with Trump called "it's baked in"? It's baked in that he's corrupt. It's baked in that the morning council poll said it's baked in that Biden is too old. And now think about that. I think, but what, and you notice that they're only polling on, I mean, they are doing overall popularity, but they kind of poll more on is Biden too old or not too old. What they're not polling on is, um, though, given a binary choice between him and Trump, how do you feel? And I think the thing is that they have spent so long telling us he's old, and we've seen an old president. We've seen an old president for 3.5 years. That yeah, he's old. We yes, and he's too old to be doing this. But as Biden says, don't judge me against the Almighty, judge me against the alternative. Right? Is is there a chance that? And here's the other thing. Um, and I'm glad you brought up the polling. Is first and foremost, where we got from the debate, a lot of people still say it's a 2 week process to really get it ingrained, and the press really beat them up last week. But that being said, what was your reaction? And I know you, when I see polls, and I'm really top line, I don't cross tab a lot just because there's so many out there, and I don't really even really attach reputation. But what was your overall reaction to the morning council poll that came out on Saturday that talked about, he's not bleeding like you think he is type of thing? What was your initial reactions? And now that you have a little bit of time to marinate it, what's your overall reaction to that poll?
Yeah, I mean, it helps fight the narrative a little bit. I think there's a big distrust in polls, generally speaking, right, John? I think the New York Times, that first New York Times Siena poll they were waiting for, had Trump +6, but had him winning the majority of Latino vote and the majority of the youth vote, and it's just unrealistic, right? I don't think a Republican has won the Latino vote since the '60s. So, um, I think there's just I don't think. Here's what I think. You talked about being baked in that he's old. I'll talk about Trump being baked in. There's just a like I don't people underestimate what happened in 2020. That wasn't necessarily an enthusiastic vote for Biden. Yes, there was some boost with Kamala and a lot of people who wanted to see that. There was some boost to people who wanted just a normal average president. A lot of 2020 was a referendum on Trump and the extremism that the Republicans present. That's baked in, I think, too, right? I think Trump's problem is his ceiling is always going to be where it's at right now. I don't know if there's more Trump voters coming. Yes, there's people who turned 18 who didn't vote in 2020 who are going to vote for Trump, of course. But what I mean is he's not he's not growing his base. His base is shrinking, and the Democrats' base is widening. But the question I have is for Democrats is I don't think this is a race about convincing Trump voters to vote for you. I think this is a race about convincing your voters to vote. We might get lucky in Arizona where Carrie Lake's on a ballot and the abortion initiative might be on a ballot. That might boost Biden. Where polling might not measure that, right? Polling doesn't measure, hey, I know you're not likely to vote, but if you do vote, would it be for this or this? They're not measuring, hey, abortion's on the ballot, Carrie Lake's on the ballot. Are you more likely to vote if those things weren't on the ballot, right? And I think that's what polling's not measuring. Florida might have abortion on the ballot. I don't think we're going to win Florida, but Florida might have a boost in numbers that polling's not adjusting for because of the abortion question on the ballot, right? So, what are things that
Arkansas,
polling
Arkansas has abortion on the ballot.
or the most Wyoming, right? The Senate seat in Wyoming that we need to hold our 50. Wyoming might have abortion on the ballot, right? So there's things that polling is just not going to adjust for. It's not, by the way, that's not its job, right? But It's just certain things. So we talked about Biden being old is baked in, but I also think it's baked in that Trump's just bad and people want to get rid of him. The sentiment, and maybe I'm a little bit biased because obviously my timeline is curated to me, but the most sentiment I've seen is I'd rather vote for a dead Biden than Trump, right? And so I don't know if people care that he's old. We also have to start pushing the message that Democrats vote on ideas and administrations and forward thinking and try to progress the country, um, and not necessarily for a king. We're not in a cult. We're not Biden cultists. We're just voting for ideas and who's going to push the envelope forward. So I think all that's kind of skewing the message as well.
Well, I got a question for you, and it's think about the people, the Democrats, and Tim Miller, who's a Republican, but think about the Democrats and the Never Trumpers who have called on Biden to step aside. At some point in time, it will become more and more impossible, especially after Biden becomes the actual confirmed official nominee of the Democratic Party. If Joe Biden toughs it out and Joe Biden does, and it's now a binary choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, what happens to the people, maybe even some of the ed boards, who call them to step aside? The people who are definitely not going to be with Trump, what do they do? Do they still call him, or do they sit in the corner? Or because they keep saying, well, if they say the stakes are really high, and if he really cares about the future of America and the future of democracy, he'll step aside. Well, no, my belief is if you really care about democracy, why are you going to go ahead and tear down the one person who is most likely to run against the threat to democracy? So, first and foremost, this is not going to go on forever. There will be, although you and I both know, after Biden becomes the official nominee, there will be always some pundit talk about, well, if you do the who's it with the what's it and blah, 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 he can still be off the ballot, right? That being said, what happens to those pundits? What happens to those elected officials who are going to be faced with a binary choice? And the reason why I ask that, I still believe that when we see the polling that says a certain percentage of Democrats want someone other than Biden, what they're not doing is a second step, which is what? But if he still is the nominee, if he's still on the ballot, what are you doing?